I still remember the exact moment my life split into before and after. It wasn't when Thomas handed me the divorce papers. It wasn't when I moved into that tiny apartment with walls so thin I could hear my neighbours breathing. It was 3 months ago, on a Tuesday afternoon, when an old woman's bony fingers wrapped around my wrist and wouldn't let go. But let me back up. Let me tell you how I ended up on that street corner in the first place. The divorce took everything. I'm not being dramatic. It literally took everything. The house we bought together, the car I loved, even the savings account I'd been building since before we got married. Thomas had a better lawyer. Or maybe he just fought harder because he had something to fight for. Her. Amber. 28 years old with perfect hair and a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. They got my old life. I got a garbage bag full of clothes and enough money for first month's rent on the cheapest apartment I could find. I used to be a teacher, 3rd grade. I loved those kids. But after the divorce, I couldn't stand in front of a classroom anymore. Everything reminded me of the life I thought I'd have, the family I thought I'd build, the future I thought was solid. So I quit. Just walked away from the only job I'd ever been good at. I needed work fast, so I took the first thing I could get, delivery driver for Quick Ship Express. My boss, Mr. Foster, didn't care that I had a degree or that I used to shape young minds. He cared that I could drive a van and follow a GPS. That was enough. The work was hard. My feet hurt all the time. My back ached from carrying boxes up flights of stairs, but it kept my mind busy. And busy was good. Busy meant I didn't have time to think about Thomas and Amber living in my house, sleeping in my bed, using my coffee maker. On my first day, I noticed her, Mrs. Cartwright, though I didn't know her name then. She was just an old woman sitting on the corner of 5th and Maple Street, right on my route. She sat on a piece of cardboard, her back against a brick wall. She wore clothes that looked like they'd been worn for months. Her hands were folded in her lap, and her head was down like she was praying or sleeping or just trying to disappear. I walked past her that first day. I had my own problems, my own pain. I didn't have energy for anyone else's. But that night, alone in my apartment, I couldn't stop thinking about her. The way she sat so still. The way people walked past her like she was invisible. The way her shoulders curved inward, like she was trying to take up less space in the world. I knew that feeling. After Thomas left, I felt invisible too, like I'd been erased from my own life. The next day I stopped. I bent down and left $5 next to her on the cardboard. She looked up and our eyes met. Hers were pale blue, faded like old jeans. She didn't say anything, just gave me a tiny nod. I walked away quickly, embarrassed for some reason. But the day after that, I stopped again. And the day after that, it became a routine. Every single day after my last delivery, I'd walk to 5th and Maple, bend down, and leave whatever money I could spare. Sometimes it was $10. Sometimes it was $3 and a sandwich from the gas station. On really bad days when my own rent was coming due, it was just a granola bar from my lunch. She never spoke, never asked for anything, just nodded or gave a small smile, and somehow that was enough. In a world where everything felt wrong, this one small act felt right. 3 months went by like this, 3 months of quiet nods and small exchanges. I started to recognize the rhythm of her day. She arrived at the corner every morning at 7. She stayed until dark. She never held up a sign, never called out to people passing by. She just existed there, like part of the landscape. I wondered about her sometimes. Did she have children? Where did she sleep? How did someone end up sitting on a street corner at 70-something years old? But I never asked. Some pain is too private, too deep. I understood that better than most people. Then came today. I finished my last delivery at 6:30. My feet were screaming. I had $8 in my pocket, all I could spare until payday tomorrow. I walked toward 5th and Maple like always, already reaching for the bills. But something felt different. Mrs. Cartwright was in her usual spot, but she wasn't sitting with her head down. She was watching the street, really watching. Her eyes moved back and forth like she was searching for something, or someone. When she saw me approaching, her whole body went tense. I felt a strange flutter in my stomach. Something was wrong. I bent down to leave the money like always. That's when it happened. Her hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. I gasped. Her fingers were so thin I could feel every bone, but her grip was surprisingly strong. She pulled me closer, her pale blue eyes locked on mine. Up close, I could see how scared she looked. "You've done so much for me," she whispered. Her voice was raspy, like she hadn't used it in years. Don't go home tonight. My heart started pounding. What? Stay at a hotel, she said urgently, her grip tightening. Tomorrow I'll show you something, but tonight, please, don't go home. I tried to pull back gently. People were walking past us, but no one paid attention. Just another crazy homeless woman, they probably thought. I don't understand. What are you talking about? Her eyes darted around nervously. Not here. Too many years. Just trust me, child. I've been watching. I've been waiting. And tonight something bad will happen if you go home. Cold fear washed over me. How do you know? What's going to happen? But she just shook her head and released my wrist. She leaned back against the wall, suddenly looking exhausted. Tomorrow. Meet me here at dawn. I'll show you everything. But tonight, please, stay somewhere else. I stood up slowly, my legs shaking. My mind was spinning. Was she crazy? Was this some kind of trick? But there was something in her eyes. Real fear, real urgency. This wasn't the rambling of someone lost in their own mind. This was a warning. Please, she said again, softer this time. You saved my life these past 3 months. Let me save yours. I backed away, my heart hammering in my chest. People flowed around me on the sidewalk like water around a rock. I pulled out my phone and checked the time. 6:47. My apartment was 20 minutes away. I could be home by 7:15, make some instant noodles, watch something mindless on TV, go to bed. Wake up tomorrow and forget this weird conversation ever happened. But my hand was still tingling where she'd grabbed me, and her voice kept echoing in my head. Something bad will happen if you go home. I stood there on that busy street corner, frozen with indecision. People bumped into me, annoyed. A car honked. The city moved around me like it always did, uncaring and endless. My thumb hovered over my phone screen. This was crazy. Staying at a hotel because a homeless woman told me to? I barely had enough money for groceries this week. A hotel room, even a cheap one, would destroy my budget. But then I remembered something. 3 months ago, I'd been walking past Fifth and Maple, drowning in my own problems when I noticed her. Something made me stop. Some instinct told me to help. What if this was the same thing? What if my instinct was trying to tell me something? I opened my phone and searched for cheap hotels nearby. My hands were shaking as I made the reservation. The hotel room smelled like cigarettes and cheap cleaning spray. The bedspread had stains I didn't want to think about, and the TV only got 3 channels. But it was safe, or at least I hoped it was. I sat on the edge of the bed staring at my phone. This was insane. I'd just spent $42 I didn't have because an old woman grabbed my wrist and told me not to go home. What was I thinking? I called my sister Amy, 2 states away. She answered on the 4th ring, sounding tired. She had 3 kids and a husband who worked nights. I heard cartoons blaring in the background. Hey Gladys, what's up? I opened my mouth to tell her everything, then stopped. What would I even say? It sounded ridiculous in my own head. Nothing. Just wanted to check in. You okay? You sound weird. I'm fine. Just tired from work. We talked for 5 minutes about nothing important. When we hung up, the silence in the hotel room felt heavier than before. I tried to sleep. I really did. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mrs. Cartwright's face, the fear in her eyes, the desperate grip on my wrist. The way she said, something bad will happen. At midnight, I gave up and turned on the TV. Some old movie was playing, but I couldn't focus on it. I kept checking my phone, looking at social media, reading news articles, anything to distract my brain. At 2:30 in the morning, I almost called a cab to take me home. This was stupid. I was being paranoid. Mrs. Cartwright was probably just confused, maybe having some kind of episode. I'd wasted money I couldn't afford to waste. And for what? Then my phone buzzed. A text message from a number I barely recognized. It took me a second to place it. Mrs. Chen from apartment 4B, right below mine. We'd said hello maybe twice in the 3 months I'd lived there. The message said, "Hey, are you okay? There are police cars outside our building. Something happened." I sat up so fast the room spun. My fingers were shaking as I called her. She answered immediately. "Gladys? Where are you?" "I'm not home. What's going on?" "Someone broke into your apartment tonight." Her voice was high and scared. "Mrs. Patterson heard crashing sounds around 11 and called the police. They kicked in your door, Gladys. The whole thing is just... it's destroyed." My stomach dropped. "What?" "The police are still here. They're asking if anyone knows where you are. They want to talk to you." I couldn't breathe. Mrs. Cartwright had been right. She'd been right. Gladys? Are you there? Yeah. Yeah, I'm here. Tell them. Tell them I'm safe. I'll come down to the station in the morning. Do you know who did this? Are you in danger? I don't know, I whispered. I don't know anything. After I hung up, I just sat there in that dirty hotel room, my whole body shaking. Someone had broken into my apartment. They'd kicked in the door, destroyed everything, and I would have been there. If Mrs. Cartwright hadn't warned me, I would have been sleeping in my bed when they came. I called the police station and spoke to an officer named Rodriguez. He was kind but professional. He asked me to come in first thing in the morning to give a statement and see what was taken. Was anything valuable stolen? He asked. I don't have anything valuable, I said honestly. Just basic furniture and clothes. That's the strange part, Ma'am. According to the officers at the scene, it doesn't look like a normal burglary. Nothing obvious was taken. Your TV is still there, your laptop. But the place was torn apart. Drawers emptied, closets ransacked, even your mattress was flipped over. Like someone was searching for something specific. My blood turned to ice. Searching for what? That's what we're hoping you can tell us. I had no answers. After we hung up, I lay back on the hotel bed and stared at the water-stained ceiling. My mind was racing but going nowhere, like a hamster on a wheel. Who would break into my apartment? I didn't have enemies. I didn't have anything worth stealing. I was nobody, just a divorced delivery driver trying to survive. But Mrs. Cartwright had known. Somehow she'd known they were coming. I didn't sleep at all. I watched the sky slowly turn from black to grey through the thin curtains. At 5:30 I couldn't wait anymore. I got dressed, checked out of the hotel, and headed toward 5th and Maple Street. The city was just waking up. A few early commuters hurried past with coffee cups. Delivery trucks rumbled down the streets. The air was cold and damp. Mrs. Cartwright was already there. She sat in her usual spot, but somehow she looked different, more alert. Her eyes were clear and focused. When she saw me approaching, she nodded once like she'd been expecting me. I sat down on the sidewalk next to her. My heart was pounding. You were right. Someone broke into my apartment last night. I know, she said quietly. How? How did you know? She looked at me for a long moment, studying my face. Then she said, because I've been watching you, and I've been watching the people who've been watching me. My skin went cold. What are you talking about? Not here. She glanced around at the empty street. Too exposed. Walk with me. She stood up with surprising ease for someone who looked so frail. I scrambled to my feet and followed her. We walked for 3 blocks in silence, turning down side streets I'd never noticed before. Finally, we stopped in a small park, just a patch of grass with a few benches and some scraggly trees. Mrs. Cartwright sat down on a bench. I sat next to her. My whole body tense. My name is Helen Cartwright, she began, and 30 years ago I testified against one of the most dangerous crime organizations on the East Coast. I stared at her. This fragile old woman in torn clothes had taken down criminals. I was supposed to enter witness protection after the trial, she continued. They wanted to give me a new name, a new life, move me somewhere far away. But I refused, because I had something they needed. Evidence. Real evidence that could destroy the entire organization, not just put away a few members. And I couldn't risk that evidence getting lost in some government filing system. So what did you do? I hid it. I hid it somewhere safe and stayed nearby to protect it. I became invisible. I became exactly what you saw. A homeless woman that people walk past without seeing. For 30 years, I've sat on that corner, watching, waiting, making sure no one ever found what I was protecting. My head was spinning. But what does this have to do with me? Why did someone break into my apartment? Helen's expression turned sad. Because 3 months ago, you started leaving me money. Every single day. Same time. Same routine. And someone noticed. Who? The organization I testified against. They never forgot about me. They've been looking for me all these years, trying to find the evidence I hid. They had people watching my old corner just in case I ever came back. Most days, no one stopped to look at me. I was invisible, just like I needed to be. She paused, her voice dropping lower. Then you came, every day like clockwork. A young woman who clearly didn't have much money, but who stopped every single day to give me whatever she could spare. That made them curious. They started following you, taking pictures, running background checks. Oh my God, I whispered. They found out you were recently divorced, that your ex-husband is... She hesitated. Your ex-husband has connections to them, Gladys. Not deep connections, but enough. They hired him to search your apartment, to see if you were working with me, to see if I'd given you the evidence. Thomas. Thomas was involved in this? He gave them the keys, Helen said gently. Last night, 3 men went to your apartment while you were supposed to be sleeping. They were looking for any sign that you knew about me, about the evidence, about any of it. I felt sick, but I didn't know anything. I was just trying to be kind. I know, child. That's exactly why I had to warn you. You're innocent in all this, but they don't know that. And until they're sure you're not a threat, you're in danger. We sat in silence for a moment. A dog walker passed by, not even glancing at us. I wondered how many invisible people there were in the world. How many stories were hidden right in front of everyone's eyes. What happens now? I asked finally. Helen reached over and took my hand. Her skin was papery thin, but her grip was steady. Now, you have a choice. You can walk away. Go to the police, tell them everything I've told you and let them handle it. They'll probably put you in protective custody for a while. You'll be safe. Or, she looked at me with those pale blue eyes, and I saw something in them I hadn't noticed before. Strength, determination, hope. Or you help me finish what I started 30 years ago. I should have walked away. Any normal person would have. But sitting there on that park bench next to Helen Cartwright, listening to her story, something inside me shifted. For 3 months, I'd been a victim. Thomas's victim, the divorce's victim, life's victim. Maybe I was tired of being powerless. What would I have to do, I asked. Helen squeezed my hand once, then let go. First, you need to understand what you're getting into. This isn't some adventure story. These people are dangerous. They've killed before. They'll kill again if they think someone is threatening them. But I'm nobody to them. I don't know anything. Not yet, Helen said. But if you help me, you will. And that makes you dangerous. That makes you a target. A jogger ran past us, earbuds in, completely unaware of the conversation happening 3 feet away. The morning was getting brighter. Soon the park would fill with people walking dogs and drinking coffee and living their normal, safe lives. Tell me everything, I said. From the beginning. Helen nodded slowly. She looked tired suddenly, like just thinking about the past exhausted her. 30 years ago, I wasn't homeless. I worked as an accountant for a shipping company called Riverside Logistics. It seemed like a normal business. Warehouses, trucks, paperwork. I did the books, tracked expenses, filed taxes. Nothing exciting. She paused, watching a pigeon peck at some scattered breadcrumbs. But after about 6 months, I started noticing things. Money that didn't add up. Shipments that went to addresses that didn't exist. Payments to vendors I couldn't find any record of. At first, I thought it was just sloppy bookkeeping. But the more I dug, the more wrong things I found. What was really happening? Riverside Logistics was a front. The company was being used to move drugs, weapons, and money all over the East Coast. They'd pack illegal goods inside legitimate shipments. They'd create fake invoices and fake companies to launder money. And I had access to all of it, every transaction, every shipment, every dirty dollar. Helen's hands were shaking slightly. I realized this was probably the first time she'd told this story in years. I made copies of everything. I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but I knew it was evidence of something bad. Then one night I was working late at the office. I heard voices in the warehouse. I knew I should have left, but I was curious. So I looked. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. I saw them kill someone, 2 men from the organization, and a man I didn't recognize. They shot him and wrapped his body in plastic. They were laughing about it, joking, like it was nothing. I felt cold all over. What did you do? I ran. I went straight to the FBI the next morning and gave them everything. All the documents, all the records, and my testimony about what I'd seen. They were thrilled. They said I'd handed them the biggest case they'd had in years. So they arrested people? 12 of them, including the man who ran the whole operation's second in command. The trial took 2 years. I testified at every hearing, every deposition. I looked those men in the eyes and told the truth about what they'd done. Helen's expression hardened. They all went to prison. Long sentences, life sentences for some. But here's the thing. I only had evidence on 12 people. The organization was much bigger than that. There were bosses above the bosses, connections I couldn't prove, crimes I couldn't document. The FBI said what I gave them was enough. But I knew it wasn't. I knew the organization would rebuild. So you kept investigating? During the trial, I learned things. I paid attention to every word that was said, every name that was mentioned. After it was over, the FBI wanted to put me in witness protection. They said the organization would come after me for revenge. And they were right. There were threats, attempts to find me. But I told them no. Why? Because I still had all my evidence, the originals, and I'd been adding to it. Names I heard during the trial, connections I pieced together, bank accounts I tracked down. Over 30 years, I've built a complete picture of the entire organization. Every person involved, every crime committed, everything needed to take them all down permanently. She looked at me directly. But I'm old now, Gladys. I'm 78. My hands shake. My memory isn't what it was. I can't protect this evidence forever. I need to pass it on to someone who can finish what I started. Why not just give it to the FBI now? Helen's laugh was bitter. Because I don't know who to trust anymore. The organization has had 30 years to plant people in law enforcement, in courts, in government offices. If I hand this evidence to the wrong person, it disappears, and so do I. A woman pushing a stroller walked past us. Her baby was crying. Normal problems. Normal life. I have one person I trust, Helen continued. A retired FBI agent named Walter Barnes. He was the lead investigator on my original case. He's been waiting for years for me to contact him. He knows I have more evidence. He's told me many times that whenever I'm ready, he'll help me bring it forward safely. So why haven't you? Because I was afraid. And because I didn't have anyone I could trust to help me deliver it. Walter lives across town. If I tried to bring him the evidence myself, the organization would see. They've been watching me all these years, waiting for me to make a move. I'm too recognizable to them now. She turned to face me fully. But you're not. You're invisible to them, just like I used to be. You're a delivery driver. You go all over the city every day. No one would think twice about you making a delivery to Walter's address. My heart started pounding. You want me to deliver the evidence to him? Yes, but there's a complication. They know about you now. They broke into your apartment looking for a connection between us. They'll be watching you too. Then how? We create a distraction, Helen said. Her eyes were sharp now, focused. I go back to my corner like normal. I make myself visible. I draw their attention. Meanwhile, you take the evidence and deliver it to Walter. If they're watching me, they won't be watching you. But they'll hurt you. If they figure out what we're doing, Helen cut me off. I'm 78 years old. I've lived longer than I ever expected to live. If I die protecting this evidence, protecting the truth, that's a good death. Better than dying alone on a street corner with this secret buried forever. I wanted to argue, but I could see the determination in her face. She'd made peace with this risk a long time ago. Where is the evidence? I asked quietly. Somewhere safe. Somewhere they'd never think to look. I'll take you there now. We stood up from the bench. My legs felt weak. I was really doing this. I was really going to help a woman I barely knew take down a dangerous crime organization. 3 months ago, I was a teacher with a normal life. Now I was, what? A courier, a witness, an accomplice. Helen started walking and I followed her. We left the park and headed down streets that got progressively emptier. Businesses here were closed, boarded up. The buildings looked abandoned. Finally, Helen stopped in front of an old church. The windows were covered with plywood. The door had chains across it. A sign said, "Condemned, do not enter." "This is where you've been hiding evidence for 30 years, I asked. Helen pulled a key from her pocket, the first possession I'd ever seen her carry. Sometimes the best hiding place is somewhere everyone thinks is empty. She unlocked a side door I hadn't even noticed. It creaked open into darkness. "Are you sure about this?" Helen asked me one more time. "Once you see what's inside, once you know where it is, there's no going back. You'll be part of this." I thought about Thomas, about Amber, about sitting in my tiny apartment feeling worthless and invisible. About 3 months of trying to do one kind thing in a cruel world. "I'm sure," I said. And I followed Helen Cartwright into the darkness. The inside of the church smelled like dust and decay. Helen pulled out a small flashlight, another item I'd never seen her carry, and the beam cut through the darkness. I could make out shapes in the shadows. Broken pews stacked against walls, bird droppings covering the floor, holes in the ceiling where rain had leaked through for years. "Watch your step," Helen said. "The floorboards are weak in places." We walked slowly down what used to be the center aisle. Our footsteps echoed in the empty space. I could hear birds rustling in the rafters above us. Something scurried away in the corner. A rat, probably. Helen moved through the church like she knew every inch of it. She led me past the main area, through a doorway behind where the altar used to be. We entered a smaller room. Maybe it had been an office once, or a place where the priest got ready for services. There was nothing in the room except dust and a few pieces of broken furniture. Helen went to the far corner and knelt down, her old knees cracking. She ran her fingers along the floorboards until she found what she was looking for. "Help me with this," she said. I knelt beside her. She'd found a board that looked slightly different from the others, newer, less weathered. Together we pried it up. Underneath was a metal box, the kind you might use for storing important documents. Helen pulled it out carefully like it was something precious. And I guess it was. This box contained 30 years of her life. 30 years of fear and courage and determination. She opened it. Inside were stacks of papers, all organized in folders and bound with rubber bands. There were photographs, some black and white, some color, all showing people and places I didn't recognize. There were small notebooks filled with Helen's handwriting, names and dates and numbers. There were USB drives, probably a dozen of them, each labeled with dates. And at the bottom there were old cassette tapes, the kind nobody used anymore. "This is everything," Helen said softly. "Names, dates, bank accounts, shipping records, recordings of conversations, photographs of meetings. I've documented every crime I could find evidence for, every person involved, every dollar laundered, every illegal shipment, every murder." I stared at the contents of the box. It looked so ordinary, just papers and photos and old technology. But it represented lives destroyed, families torn apart, justice delayed for 3 decades. "Why did you keep it here?" I asked. "In an abandoned church?" Because churches are sacred spaces, even abandoned ones. Most people won't disturb them out of respect or superstition. And this particular church, I knew the priest who used to run it, Father Michael. He was a good man. He helped me hide this before he died, and he never told a soul. I come here once a week to check on it, to add new information when I learn something. No one has ever disturbed it. Helen began taking things out of the box, showing me what each section contained. These folders are financial records, shell companies, fake invoices, money trails. These photographs show meetings between organization members and corrupt officials. These notebooks have names and addresses of everyone involved, and these recordings, she held up one of the cassette tapes, these are conversations I recorded during the original investigation, conversations the FBI never heard because I didn't trust everyone in that office. "How do we get all this to Walter Barnes? We can't carry the box. It's too obvious. We'll need to put everything in a normal bag, something you'd carry on a delivery route. A backpack, maybe. Something that doesn't stand out." I pulled out my phone. "What's his address?" Helen recited it from memory. I looked it up on my map app. Walter Barnes lived in a neighborhood about 40 minutes away by bus. It would take me past several stops, through busy areas and quiet residential streets. "When should I go?" "Today. Now. The longer we wait, the more dangerous this becomes." Helen started carefully repacking the evidence into the metal box. "But first, we need to prepare. We need to make sure you know exactly what to do." We sat on the dusty floor of that abandoned church, and Helen walked me through the plans step by step. I would take the evidence in my work backpack, the one I used every day for deliveries. I would take my normal bus route like I was heading to work. At Walter's address, I would knock on his door and say exactly these words. "Helen sent me. It's time." "Walter will know what that means," Helen said. "He's been waiting for this day for years. He'll take the evidence and know what to do with it." "What about you? What will you do?" "I'll go back to my corner. I'll sit there like I always do. If anyone is watching, and they probably are, they'll see me in my normal spot. They won't have any reason to think something's changed. But what if they come after you?" Helen's smile was sad but peaceful. "Then I'll deal with it. I've had a good life, Gladys. Longer than most. And I've spent 30 years protecting this truth. If it costs me my life to finally see it revealed, I'm okay with that." Tears pricked my eyes. "I don't want anything to happen to you." "I know, child. But some things are bigger than one person. This is bigger than me. It's bigger than you. It's about justice for all the people these criminals hurt. It's about making sure they can't hurt anyone else." She was right. I knew she was right, but it still felt wrong to put her in danger. We spent the next hour going over every detail. Helen gave me Walter's phone number just in case. She made me repeat the plan 3 times until I could recite it perfectly. She showed me which documents were most important, which USB drives had the most damaging evidence. Finally, she packed everything into my backpack. It was surprisingly heavy, not just the physical weight, but the weight of what it represented. "One more thing," Helen said. She pulled a small envelope from the bottom of the metal box. "If something happens to me, give this to Walter too. It's a letter explaining everything. Where the evidence came from, how I collected it, why it's reliable. It'll help him present it properly." I took the envelope and put it in the front pocket of my backpack. We left the church together, Helen locking the side door behind us. Outside, the morning had turned into afternoon. The sun was high and bright. People were out now, walking, driving, living their lives. Normal people with normal problems. We walked back toward 5th and Maple in silence. My backpack felt like it weighed 100 pounds. I kept expecting someone to stop us, to ask what we were carrying, to somehow know what we were planning. But no one paid attention. We were invisible, just like Helen had been for 30 years. At the corner of 5th and Maple, Helen stopped. She turned to face me, and I saw something in her expression I hadn't seen before. Hope. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for seeing me when everyone else looked away, for caring when you had every reason not to. You saved my life by being kind. Now I'm asking you to save a lot of other lives by being brave." I hugged her carefully, afraid she might break. She hugged me back, her thin arms surprisingly strong. "Be careful," she whispered. "Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, don't ignore it." "I will." "And Gladys, when this is over, when it's safe, let's have dinner. Real dinner at a real restaurant. My treat." I smiled through my tears. "I'd like that." Helen sat down in her usual spot, settling onto her cardboard like she did every day. To anyone watching, it would look completely normal. Just another day on the corner. I adjusted my backpack and started walking toward the bus stop. I forced myself not to look back. I focused on putting one foot in front of the other, on breathing normally, on looking like just another person going about their day. I was 3 blocks away when I felt it, that prickle on the back of your neck when someone is watching you. I glanced around casually, was trying not to be obvious. That's when I saw the dark car. It was parked across the street, engine running, tinted windows, no one getting in or out, just sitting there. My heart started racing. Was it them? Was I being followed? I turned the corner, walking faster. The bus stop was 2 blocks ahead. I could see the bench, the sign, a few people waiting. Safety in numbers. I just had to get there. Behind me, I heard a car door open. I started to run. My feet pounded against the sidewalk. The backpack bounced against my spine with every step, heavy with 30 years of secrets. Behind me, I heard footsteps, more than one person moving fast. I didn't look back. Looking back would slow me down. The bus stop was 1 block away. I could see people there, normal people waiting for the afternoon bus. If I could just reach them, if I could just get into a crowd. "Gladys!" The voice stopped me cold. I knew that voice. I turned around, gasping for air. Thomas stood 20 feet away. He looked terrible, pale, unshaven, wearing the same clothes he'd probably worn yesterday. Behind him were 2 men I'd never seen before. They wore dark suits and blank expressions, the kind of men who do bad things for money. "Gladys, please," Thomas said. His voice cracked. "Just stop. Just talk to us." "Stay away from me." My voice shook, but I kept my feet planted. People at the bus stop were starting to notice us. A woman pulled out her phone. One of the men stepped forward. He had cold eyes and a scar across his left cheek. "We need what's in that bag." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do." The man's voice was flat, emotionless. "The old woman gave you something. We need it back." Thomas moved closer. "Gladys, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry about everything. About the divorce, about Amber, about the apartment. I never wanted any of this. But these people, they'll hurt you if you don't give them what they want. They'll hurt me too. Please." I looked at my ex-husband, this man I'd loved for 7 years, and felt nothing but disgust. "You gave them the keys to my apartment. You helped them break in while I was supposed to be sleeping." "I didn't know they'd do it like that. They told me they just needed to look around. They said they'd be quiet, that you'd never even know." "You're pathetic," I said. The scarred man's hand moved to his jacket. I saw the shape of something there. A gun, probably. My blood turned to ice. "The bag," he said again. "Now." The woman at the bus stop was definitely filming us now. Other people were watching too. The scarred man noticed and his jaw tightened. He couldn't do anything violent here, not with witnesses, not with cameras. That gave me an idea. "Help!" I screamed as loud as I could. Someone help me! These men are trying to rob me! People jumped. The woman with the phone moved closer, getting a better angle. A man at the bus stop pulled out his phone too. Within seconds, 3 people were recording. The scarred man cursed under his breath. He grabbed Thomas's arm and started pulling him backward toward the dark car. We're leaving, now. But the evidence is not worth getting arrested over. Move. They retreated to their car, the scarred man's eyes locked on me the whole time. The look promised this wasn't over. Then they were gone, tires squealing as they pulled away from the curb. I stood there shaking, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst. The woman with the phone approached me carefully. Are you okay? Should I call the police? Yes, I managed to say. Please, call the police. The next 20 minutes were a blur. Police cars arrived. Officers took statements from everyone who'd witnessed what happened. I told them about the break-in last night, about Thomas, about being followed. I didn't mention Helen or the evidence. Not yet. Not until I knew who I could trust. One of the officers, a young woman with kind eyes, drove me to the police station. They wanted me to look at photos, see if I could identify the men who'd threatened me. But I knew that wouldn't help. These weren't street criminals with arrest records. These were professional enforcers who knew how to stay invisible. I sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair at the station, clutching my backpack, trying to figure out what to do next. The plan was ruined. They knew I had something. They'd be watching for me now. How could I possibly deliver the evidence to Walter Barnes? That's when I saw him. Officer Walsh, the friendly cop who patrolled near 5th and Maple. He was walking through the station with coffee, nodding at other officers. When he saw me, his expression changed to concern. Gladys, what are you doing here? I made a split-second decision. Maybe it was stupid. Maybe I'd regret it. But Helen had told me to trust my instincts, and every instinct I had said Officer Walsh was one of the good ones. I need to talk to you, I said quietly. Somewhere private. He studied my face for a moment, then nodded. Follow me. He led me to a small interview room and closed the door. I sat down across from him, still clutching my backpack like a lifeline. What's going on? He asked gently. So I told him. Everything. About Helen, about the evidence, about the organization, about Thomas and the break-in, and the men who'd just threatened me. I talked for 15 minutes straight while Officer Walsh listened without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and let out a long breath. That's quite a story. It's true. All of it. And I have proof. I pulled out one of the folders from my backpack. Look! Officer Walsh opened the folder and started reading. His eyes widened. He flipped through pages, his expression growing more serious with each one. Finally, he closed the folder and looked at me. This is real. Yes. And you were supposed to deliver this to Walter Barnes? You know him? Everyone in law enforcement knows Walter Barnes. He's a legend. If he says he'll handle this properly, he will. Officer Walsh stood up. Stay here. Don't move. Don't talk to anyone. I'll be right back. He left the room. I sat there alone, my heart still racing. Had I just made a terrible mistake? What if Officer Walsh was part of the organization? What if he was taking the evidence to destroy it right now? But 10 minutes later, he came back. And he wasn't alone. The man with him was older, maybe 65, with silver hair and sharp eyes. He wore a neat grey suit and moved with quiet confidence. Ms. Henderson? The man said, extending his hand. I'm Walter Barnes. I nearly cried with relief. I shook his hand and it was warm and steady. Officer Walsh called me as soon as you mentioned my name, Walter said, sitting down across from me. He's a good man, one of the few I'd trust with something like this. I pulled my backpack onto the table. Helen said to tell you, it's time. Walter's eyes filled with emotion. He reached out and touched the backpack gently, like it was something sacred. She did it. After all these years, she finally did it. She's still out there, I said urgently, on her corner. If they figure out what we're doing. Already handled, Officer Walsh said. I sent 2 officers I trust to pick her up. They'll bring her here under the guise of asking questions about your break-in. She'll be safe. Walter opened my backpack and began carefully removing the contents. His hands trembled slightly as he looked through folders, photographs, USB drives. This is incredible, he whispered. This is everything. Everything we needed 30 years ago and never got. What happens now? I asked. Walter looked up at me, and I saw determination in his face. Now? Now we burn it all down. Over the next 3 hours, Walter Barnes made phone calls. Not just to anyone, to people he'd worked with for decades, people he trusted with his life. Federal prosecutors, honest FBI agents, journalists from major newspapers who'd been investigating the organization for years. By evening, the small interview room had transformed into a command center. Laptops were open, documents were spread across the table, and serious-faced people in suits were taking photographs of evidence and making copies of USB drives. A female FBI agent named Morrison sat down next to me. "Ms. Henderson, you've done something incredibly brave today. This evidence is going to change everything." "I just delivered a bag," I said quietly. "Helen is the brave one." "Helen Cartwright has been brave for 30 years, Morrison agreed. "But she chose you for a reason. She saw something in you that made her trust you with the most important thing in her life." 20 minutes later, Officer Walsh brought Helen into the room. She looked small and tired, but when she saw Walter Barnes holding her evidence, her whole face lit up. "Walter," she breathed. "Helen." He stood and walked over to her, and they embraced like old friends. "You did it. After all this time. You finally did it." "We did it," Helen corrected, looking at me. "Gladys and I." I went to her and took her hands. They were shaking, but she was smiling, really smiling, for the first time since I'd known her. "Are you okay?" I asked. "I'm free," she said simply. "For the first time in 30 years, I'm free." The arrests started that night. Federal agents coordinated raids across 3 states. By morning, 27 people were in custody, including 2 police officers, a district attorney's assistant, and several business owners who'd been laundering money for decades. Thomas was arrested too. He cooperated immediately, giving them names and details in exchange for a lighter sentence. I felt nothing when I heard. He was part of my past now, and my past didn't control me anymore. The news ran the story for weeks. "Massive crime organization dismantled after 3-decade investigation," the headlines read. They interviewed Walter Barnes, who gave all the credit to a courageous witness who never gave up on justice. Helen's real name was kept out of the media for her safety, and so was mine. We were just sources in the official reports, but we knew what we'd done. 2 months later, I was standing in front of a classroom again. Not 3rd graders this time. High school students at a school that specialized in helping kids who'd fallen through the cracks. Kids who knew what it felt like to be invisible. On my first day, I told them something I'd learned. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create the biggest changes. You never know when choosing to see someone, really see them, might save their life. Or your own. After school, I drove to a small apartment across town. Not the tiny place I'd lived in before, a better one, in a safer neighborhood. I could afford it now. The reward money for helping dismantle the organization wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to start over properly. Helen answered the door wearing clean clothes and a genuine smile. Her apartment was simple but comfortable. She'd gained weight. Healthy weight. Her hands still shook a little, but her eyes were bright and clear. "Right on time," she said, pulling me into a hug. "Dinner's almost ready." We sat at her small kitchen table, eating pot roast and vegetables. We talked about everything and nothing, my new job, her physical therapy appointments, a book she was reading, a movie I'd seen. We didn't talk about Thomas or the organization or that terrifying day when everything changed. We'd told that story enough times to lawyers and agents. Now we were just 2 friends having dinner. After we ate, we did the dishes together. Helen washed, I dried. The simple routine felt comfortable, normal, right. "I'm thinking about getting a cat," Helen said suddenly. "I've always wanted one, but I could never take care of one when I was... before." "You should," I said. "Everyone needs someone to take care of." She looked at me with those pale blue eyes. "You took care of me when I needed it most. I'll never forget that." "You saved my life," I reminded her. "We saved each other," Helen corrected. As I was leaving that evening, Helen stopped me at the door. "Gladys, do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd just walked past me that first day? If you'd ignored me like everyone else?" I thought about it. "Every day," I admitted. "Everything would be different." "Would you change it? If you could go back?" I looked at this woman who'd become so important to me, this brave, determined, kind woman who'd spent 30 years protecting the truth. "Not for anything," I said. Helen nodded, satisfied. "Good, because I wouldn't either." I drove home as the sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. I thought about how much had changed in just a few months, how I'd gone from feeling worthless and invisible to feeling strong and purposeful. How one simple decision, to stop and help someone, had led to all of this. My phone buzzed. A text from Helen. "Thank you for dinner. Same time next week?" I smiled and texted back. "Wouldn't miss it." At a red light, I saw a man sitting on the corner with a cardboard sign. Most people drove past without looking, but I saw him. I really saw him. When the light turned green, I pulled over. I got out of my car and walked back to where he sat. I handed him a $20 bill. He looked up, surprised. "Thank you," he said quietly. "You're welcome," I said. And I meant it. Because I understood now what Helen had tried to teach me. That kindness matters. That seeing people matters. That sometimes the smallest gestures create ripples that spread farther than we ever imagine. I got back in my car and continued home. The evening was beautiful. The air was cool. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Not because everything was perfect. It wasn't. Not because all my problems were solved. They weren't. But because I'd learned something important, that we all have the power to change lives. To choose kindness over indifference. To see people instead of walking past them. And that made all the difference. 6 months after everything happened, Helen and I stood outside the old church together. The city had decided to renovate it, turn it into a community centre. They'd asked Helen if she wanted to be at the ceremony when they broke ground. She'd said yes, but only if I came with her. We watched as construction workers removed the chains from the door. That space that had held so many secrets would soon hold laughter and life again. Children's programs and neighbourhood meetings and people coming together. "It's fitting," Helen said quietly. "That place protected the truth for so long. Now it'll protect the community." I squeezed her hand. "You protected the truth. The place was just walls." She smiled. "Maybe. But sometimes we all need walls to hide behind until we're strong enough to stand in the open." She was right. We'd both been hiding. Helen on her corner, me in my tiny apartment, both of us invisible and afraid. But we weren't hiding anymore. As we walked away from the church, I thought about the title of my own story, how it would sound if someone told it, "After the divorce, I got a new job and every day I left a little money for an elderly woman who was clearly starving. One day, when I bent down again, she suddenly grabbed my hand and said, 'You've done so much for me. Don't go home tonight, stay at a hotel. Tomorrow I'll show you something.' And what she showed me changed everything. She showed me that kindness creates connections, that courage can live in the most unexpected places, that sometimes the people who seem weakest are actually the strongest, that doing the right thing is rarely easy, but it's always worth it. Most importantly, she showed me that being seen, really seen, by another person can save your life, and seeing others can save theirs. I still stop at 5th and Maple sometimes. Helen isn't there anymore, but I think of her every time I pass that corner. I think of all the days she sat there, protecting her secret, waiting for someone to see her. And I'm grateful that I did, because in seeing her, I found myself again.